Don't just carry tools, carry extra parts.
Hey, Guy here, and welcome back to Amore Van. So even if you're a brand new RVer or even someone waiting for your RV, you probably know by now that it's important to carry some tools with you. Some basic tools, screwdrivers, wrenches, a number of other things. And that's not really what this video is about. Instead, what I want to talk to you about today is not tools, but some spare parts. So our embassy is almost 2 years old now, and we've driven it over 32,000 miles. So we started to think about the fact that things could start to break on the road. They could start to need replacement. I mean, we could go years and have that not happen, but we'd rather be safe than sorry. And so what I'm going to talk to you about today are just sort of four types of items that we've started carrying in order to be in a position to get our systems up and running in the event they fail while we're 500 miles from nowhere. So the first one is probably something that you've already thought of because it's the most obvious, and that is to carry an assortment of replacement 12-volt fuses. You probably carry these already. I think if you get your van from Embassy, that they may even supply a few of these fuses at the time of purchase. But these are cheap. You can get them in any hardware store. I'm providing a link in this video to an assortment of fuses that you can buy. And you'd be kicking yourself if you are in the desert in Utah somewhere and you lose your water pump or you lose your lights or some other important appliance in your RV, your refrigerator. And the only thing standing between you and getting it up and running is a tiny little fuse, and lo and behold, you discover you don't have any with you. So carry some extra fuses. All right, the next item I want to discuss is maybe a little less obvious, and it has to do with the chassis, and that's belts. We're acquainted with it, at least two different van owners, one Embassy and one another brand, that have found themselves in the situation of having a belt break in their chassis engine while they're on the road. And you may be thinking, well, any decent mechanic or dealership can replace a belt. It's not a complicated job. Yes, that's true. But what both of those owners discovered is the dealerships don't necessarily stock the belt that you need. And in both of those instances, the owners were stranded for multiple days waiting for the belt to be delivered to the dealer. And so we don't want to be in that position. So we've started carrying belts. And let's talk about those belts. Obviously, I can only talk about the ones for the Ford Transit. If you own a different chassis, you're going to have to do a little research and figure out what belts you need. But your Ford chassis, if you have the second alternator, which you definitely do if you've got an Embassy van, and you probably do if you got a Class B RV of another brand, because they're pretty common these days to have two alternators. If you have two alternators, you've got two belts, and in the split screen that you're seeing right now, I'm showing you a diagram of those belts. And so one of the belts, you might think of it as the main belt, or the drive belt. It's the belt that runs your coolant pump, so the engine coolant that circulates in your engine, and it runs your alternator, your chassis alternator, the one that's used for the cab. And it might run some other things. And for Ford, that's this belt here. And this one is likely to be in stock at any Ford dealer, but not definitely. And it may not be in stock if at just the local mechanic, if that's the easiest place to go when you've had your problem. And you don't want to have to wait for it. Because this operates the coolant pump you're not going to be able to drive very far without it. The engine's going to overheat pretty quickly if you don't have the coolant pump operating. So if this goes, you need to replace it quickly or you're disabled, right? And so in the links, I'll give you the link to the correct part for the Ford Transit, late model Transit. Ours is a 2022. I doubt if it's changed, but you may want to investigate. And that's this belt here. If you have the two alternators, which you likely do, there's a second belt. And this is the belt that runs both the second alternator and the chassis air conditioning. The good news is good news, bad news situation. The good news is that you can still drive without this belt. You're not going to be able to charge your battery if this belt goes, charge your battery from the second alternator, and you're not going to have air conditioning in the cab, which could stink if it's a really hot day. But at least you'll be able to drive. That's the good news. The bad news is there is a very high likelihood that this belt is not in stock at the dealership that you might go to for repairs, and almost certainly not in stock if you go to just a local mechanic for repairs. And so that's why we wanted to make sure to get this belt. Now, why do I have two belts? I have two belts because one of our other owners who needed to have this belt replaced, the dealer had originally given them this part number for this Ford belt, right? And I researched it, and that looks like the right belt. But ultimately, the dealer installed this other belt by a company called Gates. Now, I've compared the belts. I think they're the same size. I think it's just a case of one being from Ford and the other being a replacement made by someone else. But I do notice maybe some slight differences in the grooves on the one belt. And this was the belt that was successfully installed by for another Embassy Ford Transit owner that has the nation's alternator, which is what we have. So I decided, better safe than sorry. I got both belts, and we're just going to carry them in the hopes that one of them is the right belt in the event that we ever need it. So carry some belts so that, again, you're not stuck in the mountains of Colorado, only to discover that the nearest place you can get your belt replaced has to wait 3 days for the belt. All right, the third thing I want to talk to you about is your water pump. Now, I'm not going to suggest that you carry an extra water pump. Certainly, if you're in a Class B RV, where every cubic inch of storage space is precious, a water pump is about yay big, and it has a useful life typically of as much as 10 years. So that's a lot of storage space to use up on something that you're not likely going to need for a long time. If you have a fifth wheel or something, then by all means carry an extra water pump. But even though the water pump, and in the split screen you're seeing right now, you can see the water pump that's installed in our van. I believe it's the one that Embassy uses routinely. It's by Flojet. While the water pump itself has a life expectancy of as much as 10 years, there is one part of the water pump that's almost always the first thing to go, and it could go in as little as 2 or 3 years, particularly if you're often in places that have really hard water, so that you might have a buildup of calcium on plumbing parts. And that's the so-called pressure switch. What's a pressure switch? So as you know, when you have power to your water pump on and you open the faucet, the pump will kick on. Why is that? Because the pump is equipped with a device that senses the drop in pressure and turns the pump on if the pressure drops, and also turns the pump off when you close the faucet and pressure returns to the lines. And all that is accomplished by something known as a pressure switch. And that is likely to be the first thing to go on your pump. And I've got two pieces of good news as it relates to this part. One is that while the pump may take up more storage room than we want to spend, The pressure switch is this small. And so again, if you're in the middle of nowhere and your water pump goes and it turns out it's just the pressure switch, it'd be nice to have one of these rather than to be stuck without water until you can get to some repair shop somewhere. That's good news number one. Good news number two is that as this picture that you're seeing in the split screen shows, the way the pump inside the embassy is oriented, this part faces out so that when you open the sink, you're looking right at this part. It can be removed and replaced without disturbing the water lines, without unhooking the pump, right? It's literally loosening a couple of screws, reattaching some wires, putting the screws back. The whole operation is 5 minutes. And again, imagine how you would be kicking yourself if you didn't have this part, so you couldn't get your water back in 5 minutes when you were up in the mountains somewhere and you had to wait for a repair shop. So carry the water pump pressure switch. Again, I'll give you a link in the description and comments to this part for the Flojet pump that Embassy uses. The final thing I want to talk to you about has to do with your surge protector. Now, if you buy your van from Embassy, you've almost certainly are also buying at the same time the Power Watchdog by Hughes Automotive, which is without doubt best in class as it relates to surge protection. And the reason why we love the Watchdog so much is that it provides all kinds of information and all kinds of different sorts of protections: low voltage protections, reverse polarity protections, absence of ground protection. And so it does all those things. But of course, first and foremost, it's a surge protector. And surge protectors work essentially by sacrificing themselves in the event of a surge. That is, the protection electronics will burn out in order to prevent that surge from reaching the van. And you know you never want to plug into anything without that surge protection, because one bolt of lightning and you could fry thousands of dollars worth of electronics in your van. One of the nice things about the Power Watchdog that sets it apart from other surge protectors is that the surge module can be replaced. Some surge protectors, it's one and done. If there's a surge, it protects your vehicle, but then you need a new surge protector. Not so with the Power Watchdog. The module can be replaced, and the rest of the Watchdog does not have to be replaced. But again, that does you precious little good if you don't have one with you. And so we carry the replacement module for the Watchdog. Now, you may be aware that one of the nice things about the Watchdog is that if you have an incident that fries your surge protector, that is, it does its job, sacrifices itself to protect your van, the first replacement from Hughes is free, but you've got to send back the damaged one, and then they'll send you a new one. Again, if you're in the middle of the New Mexico desert, a fat lot of good that does you, right? So we carry this with us. So in the event that we have a surge incident that burns out the protection module in our Hughes Watchdog, we can simply replace it. Again, it takes all of 5 minutes to replace it, and then we're good to go on our journey without worrying about plugging in without surge protection. So that's the fourth and final thing we wanted to show you. Don't be caught unprepared. Tools alone are not enough. Carry some of these essential spare parts that will get you back up and running quickly. As always, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and think about subscribing to our channel by clicking on the link that just popped up on your screen. And once again, links to all of these spare parts are in the description and comments to this video. We'll see you next time.
We hope you found this helpful, and we'll see you next time here at Amore Van.